Greetings and welcome to Paint Here Now. I am Will Parody, and today we are going to continue our exploration of complementary colors. We're going to do so by starting a painting on canvas, which is a little new for us. We've been doing a lot of work on paper in these exercises. Today we're going to work on some canvas. We're going to see what it's like to mix colors on canvas, how it's different than paper. It actually does afford some different opportunities. Your paint is much more like acrylic than it is like watercolor, as it can be if you're painting on paper. We're going to continue to use our complementary colors as pairs to work on and build a painting. Today we're going to start with red and green and white. But the next time we're going to work on the same piece, but then we're going to add in some blues and oranges. So this whole piece will have a whole bunch of different colors by mixing all of the complementary colors together, which is in effect mixing all of the primary and all the secondary colors together. So it'll be a pretty dynamic painting, and it'll be a lot of fun to try and see how it develops. But we're going to start with just one pair of complementary colors at a time. And so I think it'll be pretty exciting. We're going to do red and green today. Show you a couple things. I've got 3 reds and 3 greens in here, so we'll have a little bit more leeway as to what the different colors can do. Different types of reds and greens, and of course some white. We have a brush we might use, a new brush. That's a little different than the ones that we've been using. We might use a few different brushes. I might start actually, in fact, I plan on starting with something like this. Just see what happens. It's all about exploring anyway, so we're going to do something like that. So we've got these types of brushes to use. And we're looking forward to this. It should be a lot of fun. So without further ado, let's step into the painting. All right, so before we start painting, actually, I think I'm going to show you what we did when we mixed red, green, and white together to build a kind of a landscape, and show you what a painting with just those 3 colors, I guess 5, because we used 2 greens and 2 reds, can do. So we have, no blue, but we still got some clouds. We have water, and it almost looks like we have blue, but those are just grays and cool colors and some greens mixed with reds. So we are going to do a similar thing today on here, but we're not going to finish the piece. We're going to explore and try to find it, and then we're going to add other things with the other colors and just see how it builds up. But today, it's about red and green. So like I often do, I like to start mixing my colors on the canvas. Adding a little bit of water, might drip a little, that's fine. It will dry, but it's not going to absorb right into the paper and dry immediately. It will take a little bit more time, so you have a little bit more time to get some paint in. I like to start with the white in a situation like this. So yes, we are doing a landscapey type of thing, and I'm jumping just kind of right to the clouds, right to the sky area, and that's okay. You can start with the bottom if you want, but I think this is a good place to start. Come in here a little bit more white. It's a little bit harder to tell on a white background. The paper we're using wasn't exactly white, so the white popped up a little bit more clearly. But what we're basically doing is we're adding kind of a thin layer of some white that will mix in with our reds and greens and give it a base with which to work with, kind of for a sky. We're going to have kind of a cloudy day. We're going to not necessarily color the whole sky. We might actually come in and add some blue with it. And I got to remind myself too, honestly, that we are going to be working on this painting in other sections with other colors, so we don't have to fill everything up. So start with a little bit of red in just some areas. This is a sky. How could you be starting with red? Then we're going to come in with some green, and I'm using a red that's a little bit here. Can you see it? It's a little bit more crimson, and it's not exactly crimson, but it's definitely a little bit more on the blue side, a little bit, as you can see maybe next to this red, which is a little bit more on the warm side. And let me see. So we're going to come in with some green that's a little bit on the cool side, and just kind of put those in there like this. Wipe my brush off a little bit here and mix in and see what we get. So I think I might want to add a little bit more red. But what we've got here is a foundation for some clouds. Ooh, that's really cool. That's a neat gray. In some areas, it's a little more red than others, but some of these other areas that didn't mix the same get nice gray. So I like that as a start. There we go, add some clouds. Now I am going to add a little bit more of the green. I think that might be a bit much on this one. Gonna come back in. Just sort of mixing it like this. We can move it around a little bit here. Just a touch of red. So look at that. So we have the foundation basically for some clouds. We might have quite a lot of sky in this. That's okay. We may be able to add things. We might change. We might paint this today and have an idea and then come in next time and do something totally different. And say, well, you know what? I want to make this more of a sunset. So let's do that. And we can. Painting is so versatile and adaptable. You can layer and work things in, and it's really amazing stuff. So we still have some wetness. Now, if this was paper, all our wetness with some paint would have been dry by now. But some of that original layer we left. So that's a difference you have on canvas. Here's another difference that I'll show you as an experiment. When you paint something on paper, it's going to, you cannot really get rid of it ever again. You can move it around, it can wash real light, but without tearing the paper or whatnot or covering it, it does stain the paper. On canvas, it's a little bit different. See, look at that. Without doing much, I'm almost erasing. If I wanted to get really clean on it, I totally could. Well, not that way. But I think you can see with these swipes, I don't want to get rid of too much. But this could also be a very useful thing to do if you want to blend in color or add, pull a little bit of area out, blend in so you can see. It's like you can finger paint, you can have a little bit more opportunity with the canvas to create these different types of shapes and lines and forms. Look how cool this looks. Like in here with these the little marks they're making, you can come in with a brush again and blend them around. Big difference on canvas than on paper with what you're able to do. The ability to move and swish and not tear your surface or stain things. You can come back and get rid of paint while it's still wet. You can add and layer. The paper always folds a little bit and crinkles, in some degree, and it's not going to do that on the canvas. If anything, it gets stronger and straighter. So that's kind of fun. It's a little messy. That's okay. Clouds aren't always clean. It's not, and one of the things about painting, especially painting this way, sort of from the imagination, especially as we're exploring specific things and ideas and looking to see what things like complementary color mixing can do. It's not about, hey, we're looking to see if we can paint clouds. It's looking at, hey, look at what happens when we mix colors, and let's see if we can get something that looks like clouds out of it in order to continue to explore what the colors can do. And we can turn this into a total abstract painting if we wanted to. But for this, in the case of what we're doing now in this exercise, I don't really want to do that. It's all really abstract when you get right down to it. Even realistic painting is an abstraction of the actual phenomenon that you're illustrating. So there we go. I like this as a start. It's not much, and again, it's a little bit different than on paper, and we're not trying to finish something in a half hour here. And it's really light and faded. We've made quite a few strokes and made some marks, but we don't have a whole lot of super deep shadows, and it's, you know, even our darkest colors are not really all that dark. Just blending things in a little bit more. I think what I want to do, because I want to make sure I come in maybe with some blue next time, then we can add in a little bit more of our cloud coverage. I'm going to move on down to a next layer. So we have our first layer of clouds in this painting made with the red and the green mix. And I think it looks pretty cool and interesting. You can definitely see some strokes from the canvas, from the white on the canvas coming through a bit. And I think it's kind of neat. It's also, again, we're real thin right now. And we may come back in the course of this very lesson and add a little bit more thickness, because I do usually like to paint thick. But I like this as a foundation to start. So now let's move on. What might else we have? You know, landscapey kind of piece. Well, we're going to have some green. I think that's inevitable. We're going to have some foliage type things. Clouds like this. I think I want to have something that's, you know, we'll have some foreground, if there is such a thing, but I want there to be a level of land or something that is way in the distance. So right now, as I'm painting this, which could be hills or that kind of thing out here, there's a hint of distance, perhaps, because there's nothing else to compare it to, and there's these rolls which we recognize as some distance, but it's just pure green, right? It's not like it's really popping out amongst these clouds, and it could be a hill, a tiny little hill, like a person could be this tall next to this and walk over it. These could be like individual things of grass and not trees. So in order to bring this back and to really make it look like it's something more in the distance, we're going to add a little bit of red to it right there on the canvas. Okay, and I'm using a slight mix. One end of the brush, I'm using a little bit of this warm, and I'm mixing it in here. Other end of the brush, I'm using a little bit of the cooler red, and I'm just sort of swishing it around on here. Then I'm going to come in and add in like this, because it's not going to take all that much. Wipe it down some, and then just kind of blend it in. And it goes from green to brown pretty quick. And we want that. We want to make it really kind of far away. And I haven't added any white to it yet, and that's going to make a big difference, because we are going to do that. So I'm blending like this. Part of that too is it's going back and forth and swishing, making these kind of circles and stuff does blend the paint pretty good. Then you can go back in and add whatever you would like for strokes. As you can see, we can keep layering to get it thicker and more textured. And right now it's fairly thin, so we don't want to, you know, it'll dry and we can add a little bit more if we want, but we can add the strokes that we did in a few back and forths like this to really bring out a little bit of texture. So now there's a little bit more of a sense that these things could be in the distance. And I like the halo of that, of some of the, we can just come up a little bit. Again, we're not mimicking or copying, you know, we're trying to, oh, this scene, these mountains need to be this exact way. We're just flowing with it. One of the things that I like about going like this and blending this way is because we often do that with the clouds and the way we paint and mix things in. And it helps to connect the whole piece as a composition, not just as a connection of subject matters. Oh, this clouds need to go next to the land or the water or whatever. No, but because the circular forms of the paint itself, the action of the art making, are all sort of working together. And we can, and that doesn't have to be obvious. You can do that and then kind of cover it up and, you know, for a certain type of blending or to get a certain form. The action is there. The motion is there. It can't be taken away, no matter how much you cover it up. Okay, I don't want to go too far in. So, that's a start. But again, it's a little close. I mean, it's definitely backed up farther. I don't feel like I'm going to necessarily trip over this, but perhaps I could. What happens, however, add little white. So what we're going to do is, again, come in This is red and green we're using here. So there's something that's much more, you can even come in a little bit up here. Oh, that's almost too close. Yeah, something more like this. And then a little indication that we might have some treetops with the end of this brush. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like when you're looking up at there, it's all, you know, there's no real perfect pattern of tree lining and this and that, you know, branches are moving in different directions. It's not complete and total chaos most of the time though either. So it's nice to have a nice rhythm about how you lay these things in. Just a little bit to give some indication. So we have some fairly nice indication of distance here on this one. And I think what I'm going to do, bring that in, and I'm going to actually bring this out just a little bit more. I'm mixing a little bit of green and red on here on the side right now. Okay, so I've got this darker brown color. I'm going to bring that in and have it even be closer than this. And this is going to be even farther away. And I'll show you how we're going to do that. Bring this all up. I want a little bit more green because I don't want this necessarily to be all mud and dirt. I just don't want it to be really close to us. So, okay. A bit more white, and then we have something that feels much more, a little bit more faded. So a lot of this too, it's you know, to quote the man, Mr. Bob Ross, there's a joy of painting here. Feel the strokes and what it can do, and what happens to experiment. So we have these kinds of things. Now we're going to do something like that here where I'm going to bring it up even more. So I'm using a lot of this extra paint that I have on the brush. That is this, definitely this more faded color. And I'm going to really bring that out in what we have here. Mix it and blend it with our existing color here. And as you can see, this looks a lot closer than this. Now we have some real distance. We didn't have to mix this color right away on our palette and make it the first stroke. We found it. We started with a pure green. We added a little bit of red. We added a little bit more green. We added some white and so on. And we blended, we mixed, and then we find this through the experience of painting by really getting in there and doing it. Really mixing it up on the canvas by allowing yourself to flow and experiment and not rely on just, oh, this has to be this color or this trick for this or that. It's a whole different experience to allow yourself to build and develop a painting in this way. So we're adding a little bit more green to what we have left on our mix here, our brownish red mixed, to add a little bit of contrast up in here a little bit. Right? Because there's shadow and there's things that stand out, things that blend more. We even do the same thing in here. Slightly smaller strokes. Some areas more than others, just to give more of a sense of where the light might be coming from. And look at that. We have just real quick. And again, I'm not using any fancy brushes or anything. I'm using a brush like this. There's paint, you know, plein air teachers, artists, you know, not just plein air, which means open air landscape painting, but acrylic and oil painters alike who are adamant about brush use and keep, you know, brush care and using certain brushes and things like that. There's something to it, especially if you want to paint in that real academic way. But being able to take any brush that you might find, and it might live a long, hard life, but it's still around to tell its tale. You know, you can do a lot of stuff with that. And if you get these weird little strokes or things that happen, you can incorporate it into the piece. And then if you really want to do some nice detailing or make something look a little really a certain way, then you can grab a detail brush or something like that. So anyway, so we've got the idea here of something going on. I'm still leaving this for now because I'm just not sure yet what we're going to do. But I'm not ignoring it. In fact, I'm just for the sake of having a little something, because there'll probably be something here. In fact, now I'm starting, yeah, actually I do like that. Yeah, probably have some water coming in this way. And again, hesitant in a way to do a lot because we're going to add other colors and layers, but we've got to do some stuff here and keep going. So we're going to bring this in a little bit more, like there's another patch of land. Oh yeah, that's deep. Add a little bit of this warmer red in here and mix that up. I want it a little bit of red, but not too much. I still want to keep it very much a green here, but a green that's more brought back and a little earthier like this. There we go. That's pretty good. And then maybe we've got some trees starting to form a little bit closer like this here in this area. Coming in with this brush just a bit back and forth. Now, if I wanted, because of the way we set this up, and I'll show you. I don't think I'm going to do this, but I'll show you. Automatically here, by the way I'm sort of building these trees, like this, up like this, how we built this looks like it could be a reflection. And if you wanted, oh my God, that's so cool, let's do it, and have some blue in here, you can do that. You can, one thing, take the edge of your brush and make these little marks, like to indicate there's an edge, maybe even a little bit in the water, just little bits like that here and there. And then what I might do is I might come back even with the brush and blend them just a little bit like that, so they look a little bit more in. And then we could have, if you had more indication of water, a little bit more blue or white or things like that, then you could really build that up. I could go in and with a brown, for example, and make a more, I don't really have one mixed. I can do that though. Yeah, see, we'll use this earthier, redder kind of brown to really make a distinction. Come in here to add a little bit of, see that? And we're still in the distance. We're not allowing it to get too sharp on us. And now we have these little bits of brown land that separate the trees from this reflection in this water, which is kind of cool, isn't it? Gosh, now I don't know if I want to get rid of it or not. We'll paint around a little bit here. So, as an example, I'm going to keep this little ridge of land, but I want a little bit more land up in here. So I'll just show you that. And then also to show you, as you're painting, you can do things like that. You can have this idea and then change it. You're not glued to anything. I could paint any number of examples. I can make smiley faces out of these circles, do all these things, and still pull out a landscape where you would never even necessarily know there's smiley faces unless you really looked and they just captured you because they're intrinsically there in the conscious composition of the piece. So there's always going to be that little reflection, that little thing there, even if no one else knows but us watching this. So I wanted to continue to explore. So definitely, oftentimes what I'll do is if I pull a color out in an area that's a bolder color, especially if I already have an established foreground or something, I will add some of that immediately to here because this is going to be the bolder, brighter color anyways. And then I have sort of a sense of how I blend this, how it will affect the thing that's more in the foreground, and how this tends to recede. So I want to do a little bit of a grassy land thing. So I think I want maybe some flowers and a few more little extra trees. And we're going to have some water though, don't you worry. I want to change it up a little bit here. So often that I do a water at this level and I want it to come in more like a river or something and maybe swerve around. We'll see. We will get some hints of it with the red and green. But we're going to do a lot with the blue, of course. So here, let me see. We're going to take a little bit more of this other earthier green now that we added some of this lighter green and just start to make some nice contrasts. A little bit more indistinct levels of foliage, not necessarily trees. You see, we've changed our atmosphere, our landscape a little bit by adding this green in. It's much more field-like. So now these are almost like bushes or other types of growing things. Maybe they're heather or blackberries or something, you know, like along the river. We have that a lot around here, not the heathers so much, perhaps, as like things like blackberries or other times of really other things that aren't, you know, things that are other flowers and things like that. So we have some things growing in here, some little types of plant lives, and we have some more in the distance. We add in just hints of it in the back. Not nearly as bold as our other stuff. We have more trees though to deal with here, don't we? So we're going to add a little bit, touch of water, just a little bit. We're going to mix to our ongoing little brownish green section over here, and then add a few more of our background trees, like we have over in here, just to keep a little bit going. A few more in the mini distance. So I'm actually going to have to bring that down just a little bit of red and a little bit of white. So let's see, mix that up a little bit. Maybe these are a little bit different. And then some maybe a little further away. In fact, add a little bit more white to this. That helps to subdue some of the color more. Makes it less saturated, less bold, so it looks a little bit more distant, and we'll make them a little smaller. And whatnot. We might come back and address this from a slightly different angle. But I want to put a little bit, so I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to do with the rest of what's going on here when we start to add the other colors and stuff. But we're going to find it and build it and, you know, see what happens. My goal is to only use one set of primary colors or complementary colors at a time. So I don't necessarily want to go back to red and green. So I'm just going to add some greens here and there to some areas that I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. And there's going to be something there. In fact, I do want to do some, well, we might very well come back and cover this. The idea though is that if we wanted to have a little bit more foliage in some of these areas from these other things that will go on that we haven't really addressed, we can do that. Mostly, and then maybe there's some different levels. If I really wanted to commit to something, I could do that. So right now I'm just adding some. We may well cover it up. But it also helps me to get a more sense compositionally of where we're going. So I'm adding a little, there's going to be some river in here. Maybe a little bit of green. Part of me thinks there might be some rocks and some things coming out in here. And there's usually a little foliage on the rocks. So I want to just add a little hint of green. We'll be able to make it come up more or less with the other colors. It's going to look a little weird and unfinished when we leave this time because of this. It's going to be an interesting experiment and exercise to see how that will mix with the next set of colors and how we can make it all work. So I want to add a little bit of this idea of a river. You know, if we have all these colors in here, then it would make sense that the water, body of water, river or whatnot, and it is a river here, I believe, would also have some of those colors somehow reflected in it. Or as a painter, I really like to have a little bit of the colors everywhere into things, especially if there's water. You know, it's nice to be able to mix a little green in if you're using green, even if it's predominantly blue. So there's going to be more blue coming in. So one thing I want to do, and I'm going to switch brushes here. I'm not going to use that fancy brush yet that I brought up, actually. I think I'm going to save that to experiment with next time. The thing that I want to do is I want to come in here with a slightly smaller brush and definitely indicate a little bit more detail in some foliage over here. It's a little dark and then a little bit more light. I'm definitely going to come in some of these areas with the yellow for some highlights, and we'll see how that is going to be pretty cool. And again, I'm going for the emulation of, or the evocation of a landscape image of nature. It can still be subjective or abstract. Someone can look at this and still looks like a whole bunch of strokes. Maybe it's grass, maybe it's some other kind of plant life. Like, I really like the idea of leaving and incorporating a certain level of abstract interpretation into this kind of work. It's a way to connect, another way to connect with painting as a combination of colors and forms, as opposed to just the manifestation of a particular idea or subject. It's cool. It's nice. We'll be able to add a little bit more detail in there. I'm going to add a little bit more of some of this darker green. This is what I'm adding now is going to be a much sharper, bluer green, which is going to definitely bring out a little bit of the forwardness of some of this. I don't want to overdo it, especially because it's all still rather wet. And it's easy to mud up like this, with paint like this, but just a little bit more of a slightly bolder, I kind of like that color with a few more particular strokes, and it's not go too far. All right, that's good there. Maybe a little bit up here. And we may add, you know, something. This is going to be, we may add some trees or something up here, actually. We'll see. Or we'll just continue to make a really cool sky with a bunch of different colors and clouds, because that's pretty as well. As you can see, we definitely have, I feel like the canvas is slightly different feeling than the paper. Now, this was going in to be much more intended to be finished at the time, but you can already see the clouds have a different feel than on the paper. They're going to get fluffier. We're going to keep building on them and adding and see what happens. Same thing, of course, with the water and the river. And I'm going to add just a little bit more, speaking of, in the river, of this kind of color. I'm also going to add a little bit of red. Just a few things here and there, because it helps to bring out, you know, things to the background a little bit more, as well as, you know, connect to the other reds we've been doing and using. And again, a lot of this is going to get covered and re-added on. I'm going to take this opportunity to make sure that we are incorporating our colors into the mix of this whole piece. We'll be able to come up on these again with some other different and bolder colors. Keeping some white areas in here, not filling it completely. So again, I'm intentionally leaving some areas. I didn't want to make this feel finished and then add on top. I want there to be a need for our next expedition. So I think that's a pretty good start. You know what? We're going to do one more little thing here, actually. Where some of these, now that they're a little more dry, I'm going to come in and add a little bit of highlight. Blend it in just a little bit more, and up in here. And even back in here, just a touch, little touches with the end of the brush, just to indicate that they're not just a one-colored slob of paint. All right. Well, we got a little cut off there at the end, just a tidbit. We just got added a little bit more red in here and washed in the river type area with some water. It actually looks like it could be grassland too, but the idea is we'll come in with some blue and we'll start to add and bring out some more aquatic elements in this. I didn't want to go overboard by painting this whole thing with the one color, I wanted to leave some area, or one set of complementary colors. I wanted to leave areas where we can explore with some of the other colors. And we added a little bit of dark brown in here in some of these areas too, to bring out a little bit more depth and space. And that's about it. So that's where we will leave off today. Next time we'll come back with some orange and some blue and some white, a few different of those hues, and mix around and see what we can get to continue to bring out this piece. Maybe work on some sky and clouds a little bit, and continue to bring in some of these areas and just explore, see what happens. This is all experiment for me too, so it's a lot of fun to be able to see what paint can do if you allow yourself and your imagination to explore with it. So until then, till next time I should say, stay happy, healthy, creative, keep making art, and thank you all very, very much for your ear and your time.